students, I welcome you all to my today's session, which is on postmodernism and sociology. In this lecture, I will be talking about the relationship between sociology as a discipline and the theoretical turn of postmodernism. As you all know, that postmodernism is not an unfamiliar term today in most academic discussions. Having its roots in the Western theoretical tradition, this term, however, seems to be one of the most difficult ones to have a precise definition. There is no unified notion of postmodernism or a coherent set of ideas that back up postmodern theory, but it is a diverse array of theories which are often lumped together and designated as postmodernism. The structure of the presentation is like this. I will begin with what is postmodernism, and then I will move over to discussing some of the fundamental characteristics of the postmodern theoretical turn in sociology, and then I will move over to discussing one of the most illustrious figures within this tradition, that is Michel Foucault, and his contribution to postmodernism. And finally, I will discuss the implications of the postmodern theoretical turn for sociology as a discipline. The term postmodernism basically refers to an intellectual movement that critiques modernism and the central tenets of modernism. It emerged in the West from the late 20th century, that is, from the late 1980s and 1990s. Some of the most celebrated names which are associated with postmodern theorizing in sociology include Foucault, Baudrillard, Lyotard, Jameson, Harvey, and so on. I will deal briefly with the term postmodernism itself. The term postmodern indicates a passing off of the phase of modernism. It indicates a discontinuity with the phase of modernity and the coming in of a new phase. Scholars have emphasized the need to develop a new theoretical framework to look at this new phase. And this new theoretical framework develops a critique of the knowledge systems of the phase of modernity. What is modernity? Modernity is usually identified as a historical phase following the Middle Ages or feudalism. The theoretical discourses of modernity championed reason as a source of progress in knowledge as well as in society. It is largely inspired by the works of the great Enlightenment thinkers such as Descartes and Kant. Postmodern theorists argue that there are certain fundamental social changes which are being witnessed at this moment, which perhaps require a new way of theorizing about it. Postmodern theory essentially tries to explain these processes of social transformation underway. And I quote from Best and Kellner here. The various postmodern thinkers have tried to analyze these processes of social change in different ways. And just to sum up the different ways in which this theoretical domain has advanced, I will quote from Best and Kellner. They say Baudrillard and Lyotard interpret these developments in terms of novel types of information, knowledge, and technologies, while neo-Marxist theorists like Jameson and Harvey interpret the postmodern in terms of development of a higher stage of capitalism, marked by a greater degree of capital penetration and homogenization across the globe. These processes are also producing increased cultural fragmentation, changes in the experience of space and time, and new modes of experience, subjectivity, and culture. I will now discuss some of the fundamental postulates of postmodern theoretical tradition. First, it moves beyond the claims of universal knowledge and meta-narratives. Instead, it focuses on hybridity and differences. Second, it focuses on the question of representation, how knowledge is represented by the knower and the one who produces knowledge. All knowledge, according to this tradition, is a representation. And as representations, they are individually as well as socially constructed. The third important postulate of this theoretical tradition is that there is no notion of objective truth in the sense of fact, which is unchangeable and universal. It is also against any notion of unilinear progress, which is imagined within the tradition of modernity. And finally, postmodern thought emphasizes on the relationship between knowledge and power. We will be explaining all of these postulates further through the work of Michel Foucault. But before we move on to Foucault, I will briefly talk about some of the important figures and their contributions, their key focus within the postmodern tradition. To begin with, Jean Baudrillard. Baudrillard foregrounds in his work the problem of representation. He suggests that what we think of as reality is a reflection of language and other signs. And he describes a crisis of representation in the postmodern phase. He argues that representation of any sort may become impossible in postmodern societies, as that the line between representation and real is slowly collapsing. So in a postmodern world, Bourdieu describes representations have erased the reality, because what we have is what he describes as simulacra, that is, copies without original, which are reproduced over and over again. We have lost sight of the original and copies are being made of the copies. This represents the culture of simulacra according to Baudrillard, what he calls a hyper-real world, where representations have become more real than the real. For example, the media images that are produced through news, through soaps and serials, seem to have an effect which seem to be more real than the real world people inhabit in. He describes the postmodern as the age of semiurgy, where he says the signs take on a life of their own and they constitute a new social order. Moving on to Lyotard and his most celebrated work, which is titled as The Postmodern Condition. This work basically seeks to build a postmodern epistemology that focuses on representation and largely deals with the issue of language. Postmodern epistemology, Lyotard argues, is against modern epistemological meta-narratives and stands for heterogeneity, plurality, and the local determination of local rules. The other thinker of this tradition, Jameson, in his work Postmodernism or the Cultural Logic of Late Capitalism, interprets the emergent forms of postmodern culture within the context of contemporary capitalism. For Jameson, postmodernism is a form of culture that characterizes contemporary mass consumer culture. And he characterizes this mass consumer culture as composed of images and spectacles, having a high intensity emphasis on appearance, style and look, glitz and glamour. By understanding the new forms of global capitalism and culture that are emerging, Jameson arrives at his postmodern theorizing. we now move on to the third part of this module, which is about the work and the most significant works of Michel Foucault, who is one of the celebrated figures of the postmodern tradition. Michel Foucault was born in Poitiers, France in 1926 in an upper middle class family. He received his early education in local state schools, and further he studied philosophy at École Normale and the University of Paris. Foucault taught in French departments in Sweden, Poland, and Germany during the 1950s and returned to France in 1960. He began his teaching career in France at the University of Clermont-Ferrand and later taught at the Collège de France for the rest of his life. The most important figure which had a dominant influence on Foucault's work was the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Coming to some of his most important works. Foucault's first major study, which is titled as Madness and Civilization, was published in 1960 and it is derived from his doctoral thesis. It was on madness, focusing on the development of the sciences of psychiatry and psychology and the birth of the asylum at the end of the 18th century. His other notable works include The Birth of the Clinic, which was published in 1963, The Order of Things, 1966, Archaeology of Knowledge, 1969, Discipline and Punish, 1975, and the 3 volumes of History of Sexuality, the first volume being published in 1976 and the other 2 volumes published in 1984. Now we will discuss some of the key ideas of Foucault's theoretical contribution. Foucault rejects the idea of truth as fact in the sense of being objective and unchangeable. He draws attention to the question of representation, which is an individual as well as a social construction. Second, he asserts that knowledge is intrinsically related to power, and he expressed this idea through his very, very influential terminology, power knowledge. Through this concept, he draws attention to the question of how knowledge gets to be produced or what goes into the making of knowledge. To uncover this, he uses 2 methods in his analysis, archaeology and genealogy. Broadly using these 2 methods, he shows how knowledge is produced as well as formalized by discourses. He particularly focuses on the discourses of sexuality, insanity, and criminality to uncover the processes of formation of discourses. Finally, his notion of power is radically different from all other previous notions of it. Rather than viewing power as emanating from particular institutions, he views power as relational and as something that is enacted in every interaction. Now we will move over to Foucault's discussion on power and some of the central assumptions of his notion of power, which is radically different from all other notions of power. As Mills describes, Foucault argues power needs to be seen as something which has to be constantly performed rather than being achieved. He argues that power is a set of relations which are dispersed throughout society rather than being located within particular institutions such as the state or the government. Thus, power is something which does not emanate from institutions, but is dispersed across society. It is not necessarily imposed from above, and every individual constantly uses power as a performance. Thus, for Foucault, power is not a negative concept, but can be productive and therefore positive. He develops 2 important ideas in relation to this notion of power, which are termed as disciplinary power and biopower. We will now talk about what is biopower and what is disciplinary power. We will begin with his idea of disciplinary power. The idea of disciplinary power was developed in his work, which is titled as Discipline and Punish, published in 1975. And in this book, what it does is to describe the transformation and the nature of punishment as a method of exercising power in the different eras in Europe. The transformation from methods of public execution to the methods of incarceration and surveillance. He does not perceive this change in the method of punishment used by the authorities as something which is necessarily progressive. And he argues that the transformation of the method of punishment simply implies a shift in the nature and the locus of power. A transformation from sovereign power, where the locus of power lies with the sovereign, to new forms of power, wherein power now resides within the social body. To continue with his idea of disciplinary power, I have to bring in a related notion which he develops, which is called self-discipline. It refers to the process by which the techniques and procedures which are used to regulate individuals in institutions such as the prison, the clinic, the hospital, they become a way of behaving in general. Thus, discipline consists of a concern with control, which is ultimately internalized by each individual. Self-discipline simply refers to the process of disciplining of the self by the self. The most important concept that he uses to understand this idea of self-discipline is that of the panopticon. The panopticon is basically an architectural device which was described in the 18th century by the thinker Jeremy Bentham. What is a panopticon? Panopticon is a technique of arranging people in a way that, for example, in a prison, it is possible to see all of the inmates without the observer being seen and without any of the prisoners having access to one another. Since in this method of surveillance, one is not aware of when one is being observed, what the panopticon does is to make the inmates internalize the disciplinary gaze. They become disciplined even when no one is observing them. The other concept which we need to discuss is that of biopower. The idea of biopower refers to a mode of political rationality that justifies administration of the population as subjects and the subjugation of their bodies to ensure, sustain, and multiply life, to put this life in order. This is what I quote from Foucault himself from his work History of Sexuality, which was published in 1976. So what is biopower? In other words, biopower refers to the various strategies which are used by administrative bodies to control the body of the subjects, their life as well as their death. He describes how the various forms of knowledge and practices relating to hygiene, public health, control of reproduction and sexuality became the subject of administrative interest. And he particularly mentions that sexuality was a key factor in this process. And by controlling sexuality, populations could be disciplined medically, morally, and also by means of this, the population could be reproduced. The theme of biopower and the politics of biopower are discussed in details of the volume 1 of History of Sexuality and his lectures, which are titled as Society Must Be Defended, which was published in 2003. Now we move on to the other most important theme of Foucault's contribution, which is about power knowledge. Foucault is one of the pioneers in social sciences to postulate a formulation that knowledge equal to power. According to him, there is no objective or absolute truth, and knowledge is contingent because it is ultimately tied up with power. Who produces power and how? And who produces knowledge and how? these are intimately connected with each other. In his Power Knowledge, which was published in 1980, Foucault explores the way some statements come to be established as fact or as true, while denying the validity of other statements. So in this work, to establish the intimate relationship between power and knowledge, he uncovers how truth comes to be established. And one of the ways to understand the formation of truth, according to him, is to understand how discourses come to be formed. I quote from Mills, "Something which is regulated by a set of rules which lead to the distribution and circulation of certain utterances and statements. Some statements are circulated widely and others have restricted circulation." So basically, discourse, according to Foucault, is associated with relations of power. It is power which helps some truth to be established as fact. For something to be considered as a fact, it must be subjected to a process of ratification by those in positions of authority. And Foucault invested himself in understanding the formation and changes in the nature of discourses in Europe from the 17th century to the modern times. We move over to the last part of our discussion today, which is about the relationship between postmodern thinking and sociology. Postmodern thinking has contributed to sociology in terms of thinking in new ways. The primary contribution of postmodern theorizing to the discipline of sociology has been the development of what is termed as critical thinking. In other words, it has contributed to the development of critical knowledge within sociology to understand power relations in society. What postmodernism has done is to give a unique new lens to look at the social world. It not only tries to make sense of the new developments in society, but what it also does is to relook at knowledge of society itself. Basically, what it has done is to help to critically look at some of the conventional ways of theorizing which have been practiced in sociology so far and which has been associated with modernity, which emerged from the post-Enlightenment period. One of the central assumptions of this new way of creating knowledge in postmodern theory, which basically is a critique of modernity, is to go beyond the notions of universal truth and meta-narratives. It asserts that social phenomena is best understood through perspectives which emphasizes on differences, hybridity, and fluidity. What we discussed through today's lecture was basically to begin with the idea of postmodernism, and then we moved over to understand the basic thrust of the theoretical domain of postmodernism. Then we discussed some of the primary works of one of the key figures of postmodern tradition, Michel Foucault, and some of his most important concepts, which has redefined the domain of postmodernism. And finally, we also discussed the implications of postmodern theorizing on the discipline of sociology. To sum up, the postmodern theoretical turn has implications for understanding social phenomena in newer ways with a critical subjectivity. It brings in the central concerns with the question of power and its relationship with knowledge production. It urges to critically look at given knowledge as truth or universal truth. It asserts fundamentally that knowledge is essentially contextual and contingent. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the session. I look forward to seeing you in the next session. Thank you.